all of the articles from the beat writers, I thought your article for the president of basketball operations was the one where I'm like, Kory gets it. Kory gets it 100%. Now, I did make a graphic, and I did want to put the four guys that you did write in your article on the screen
Okay.
for people to see. We can go through it real quick. So you had Tayshaun Prince, which I think a lot of fans really like, especially him being part of that 04 squad. You had Bob Myers, Trent Redden, and Dwayne Casey, who I think a lot of fans they saw that name and they're like, why? But
Yeah.
what I want you to kind of do is go through each candidate and tell me why you think Tayshaun Prince would be a good fit for the Pistons as a president of basketball operations.
Well, first off, Tayshaun Prince has the experience, which a lot of people really don't realize. He's the vice president of basketball affairs right now for the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, he lacked the front office experience back then, of course. He was, still a player, but I mean, the guy knows his stuff. He's a well-respected basketball mind around the league. He's been a part of their scouting, their player development, instrumental in the hiring of Taylor Jenkins. And on top of it all, while he may not really have, I don't really want to say he doesn't have any ties to this current organization, but what he does have ties is to the Pistons in general. He's a former player, helped deliver one of their 3 championships, and Tayshaun Prince knows what it takes for what Pistons basketball looks like. I think that if you bring him in here, you will have a fresh young face. You will be able to get some of these older Pistons to come back and help shape the culture of this team. Because when I talked to Rip Hamilton, he said those older guys, Joe brought some of those guys back to say, hey, this is what we're about. This is what this franchise is about. You bring in a Tayshaun Prince, I think that he's going to be able to set that tone and turn it around. And he kind of reminds me of a Joe Dumars in the sense of that he's soft spoken, but he's well respected. I think that Tayshaun is a real sleeper pick.
I would assume if they did bring in Tayshaun, if that is an option, I think they may give him a dual role personally, to kind of sweeten the deal. Because he's VP right now with Memphis. Who's to say they don't offer him like a dual role like Van Gundy had? Not so much the coach, but maybe they make him the GM and president of basketball ops. Maybe that would be appealing to him, but I do agree with you. I think if you look at Memphis and you look at how they rebuilt from, moving on from guys like Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, and Marc Gasol, you look at their draft picks, they've had some really good draft picks. I mean, getting a guy like Dylan Brooks in the second round, identifying Jaren Jackson Jr. as a top 5 pick, John Moran. I mean, there are countless others, Desmond Bane. I'm sure I'm missing, a few other guys that they've drafted over recent years. Memphis always drafts really well, and I'd like to think that Tayshaun is in the war room. He's at the front of it. And I think for Pistons fans, that would just be a home run pick because you're bringing back somebody that gave them great memories from so many years ago. I don't know if it's like a realistic option, but I absolutely love that you did have him in that list. I did want to transition into Bob Myers, though, because I feel like Pistons fans are 50-50 on it. I've seen some Pistons fans saying that, hey, why not? He built the Golden State Warriors, but, there's other Pistons fans saying, like, I don't want this guy anywhere near the front office, given, his ties with Darntello, which I don't even know if there are ties. I haven't even, looked into it. But kind of talk me into Bob Myers. Would that be a guy that the organization tries to, persuade to leave what he's currently doing on TV and in the NFL?
Well, I would say this. Here, I'm going to talk you into Bob Myers. First off, would he leave TV? Monty Williams wanted to take a year off. What did Tom Gores do? Tom Gores basically offered him a blank check. 6 years, $78.5 million. At the time, record deal for a coach. Reset the bar. Tom, whether you love, hate, dislike, whatever about Tom Gores, he'll pony up the money. If you can seriously get a Bob Myers to come here, write the check. Here is why. He knows what championship basketball looks like. He helped, even though he didn't have a hand in drafting Steph, he had a hand in crafting the rest of that team. He's good. He knows how to lure free agents. Now, he did have the connection with Arntelin back in the day. He interned for him at Coleman Associates, one of their best closers when it came to player negotiations and contracts. So that's also a guy that you want to be able to have in the front office, somebody that is a name that people know and is well respected and can even get those guys on the phone to come into there. I think that you have to at least pick up the phone to do one or two things. Even if you cannot get Bob Myers to come in and be your president of basketball ops and run the whole thing, you're talking about hiring a search firm to look for this next person. You need to get Bob Myers on top of that search firm. You need to get him in there to at least help you guide this process of finding this next president of basketball ops and finding this next general manager. It remains to be seen if it will work out for the Washington Commanders, but they brought him in to come do that. They hired him to come do the exact same thing because he's well respected and he knows the ins and outs. So you at least have to make the phone call. If he hangs it up, so be it. You can at least say, we made the call.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting name. I wasn't too surprised when I saw it. I asked you, it's just like he'd probably have to, walk away from the NFL if he took a, an NBA job, because I don't really think they'd let him do both personally. I don't know if there's rules against that where you can do both, but I think he's interesting.
And on top of it, he did say that he's wanted to step away for a little bit. Maybe he's wanted to step away from everything that was going on in Golden State, but he also said that he would see himself back in an executive role with basketball when the time comes. So maybe that Pistons job could be that time. I don't know how strong his ties to Arn are still. I mean, again, you just want to make sure you get somebody in there that's well respected. And I mean, the guy, whether you love him, hate him, or like him, the guy has 4 rings. I mean,
yeah, I mean, you can't. I mean, you can't refute that. You'd be like the Klay Thompson with your 4.
Yeah.
The next guy you had on your list, I'm not too familiar with. Trent Redden. I know he's the GM of the Clippers. Is he kind of like a under the radar high riser guy that could possibly, work into a front or basketball operations role?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I think this guy is somebody that you just I would at least interview him. I mean, he spent 11 seasons with Cleveland. He was former basketball operations manager. Then he got promoted to assistant GM and vice president of basketball ops. He was a part of that front office when the Cavaliers won that 26 championship. And he then went ahead and went over to the Clippers. And since his time in the Clippers, a couple of teams have been trying to poach him away to be their general manager. The New Orleans Pelicans was one as recently before he got his promotion. But the guy's considered a well-respected mind as far as his basketball acumen. He oversaw their G League. He oversaw the Clippers G League affiliate process. And he's thing about it, really like about him that he's young. He's 40 years old. So again, he's well regarded for his talent scouting and his leadership. And I know fans may not like this one, but former Pistons coach Lawrence Frank loves him and has been doing his best to keep him with the Clippers. So again, it will be an underrated. I think it will be an underrated move. A guy that's on the rise.
Oh, for sure. Like, I'm not gonna act like I've seen or heard his name. I really haven't. This is actually the first time I've read about him this week. I was like, I've never heard of him. Wanted to educate myself a little bit. So I just assumed he was like a high riser, worked his way up the ranks.
Yeah.
So that's good. I mean, maybe you want to take a shot on a guy like that, but kind of given who the owner is, I don't really know if you could sell him on a guy that's not a household name. And I think that's where you kind of have to like look at it too from a Tom Gore's perspective is I really haven't seen him hire someone that isn't established or has like that, that name.
And again, that might be something they need to break away from also as well. Just going away from the typical hot guy and like, oh, hey, I know him. Let me grab him. That doesn't mean it's going to be good for what you need as far as the makeup of your team. So when I was looking at Trent, when I was looking at some names who would make sense, I'm like, maybe this guy could be this could be one of those. Hey, where did you find this diamond in the rough at?
Yeah, I mean, when the Pistons hired Malik Rose, like no one knew who that was a few years ago, and he found them Christian Wood, who was in and out of the G League, and Christian Wood had a breakout season with Detroit, and he's been on several teams since then. Like maybe it could be a guy like that. You never really know. The last guy on the list, I think a lot of people are familiar with. He was the head coach of the Pistons for a few seasons, Dwayne Casey. Talk the fans into Dwayne Casey, why he would be a good fit, and why you think he could possibly be a president of basketball operations.
This one is going to actually be the easiest one, actually, be quite honest. So first off, I want to tell people this. Dwayne Casey, the coach, and Dwayne Casey, president of basketball operations of the Detroit Pistons, would not necessarily be mutually exclusive of how they operated. You have to remember this about Dwayne Casey. When he came here, he was supposed to be given a playoff team. He was supposed to be coaching a playoff team for years to come. Like almost immediately after the 41-41 season, the Pistons initiated a rebuild. Dwayne Casey wasn't supposed to coach a rebuild. Dwayne Casey was not supposed to coach the cluster, that he had to. But he made the best out of it, and he was a great ambassador for the team, and he was well-respected, and he's well-liked by his players. Dwayne Casey is well-respected around the league. Everybody talks about how smart he is, and he's a great ambassador for the team as well. He's who knows what his role right now is in the front office. We know he's in the front office, but you always see him around, and he's still that guy. I think Dwayne Casey, as a president of basketball ops, would bring a certain decorum and respect back to the team. Not saying necessarily lacks it right now, but he has a direction and a vision of how basketball should be played. And I think that he would be able to really put his fingerprints on the team in that role. I don't count what happened to him as a coach against him. Yes, coaches are responsible for the on-court product. But when you're given an on-court product that really isn't that it really is not going to progress towards winning, how are you expecting him to make chicken salad out of? Yeah. So again, he has the experience around the league. He has the ties. And I think Dwayne Casey would be a solid choice as president of basketball ops. The one thing I would say that would be really interesting about it is Troy Weaver was his boss. And now he becomes Troy Weaver's boss. So that would be an interesting dynamic right there.
Yeah, it really would. I think the one thing about Casey that fans maybe it's kind of under the radar, they haven't really looked into it, is to your point, Casey coached for several years as an assistant, got his coaching break in Toronto. He has a good eye for talent. From my understanding, Casey's role with the front office is basically scouting and, in the scouting department, looking, this upcoming draft and, going to events and stuff like that. I will say, I think Casey's voice is a voice that Tom Gore's respects. And, maybe Casey could say, hey, I just don't think that, Troy Weaver is the man to be a general manager anymore. Maybe we put him in the scouting department. Because I was talking with the fan earlier. I don't think because people think Troy is just going to get canned and get fired. I think Tom Gores would want to keep Troy Weaver because he spent so much time, energy, and effort bringing him in the front office. I think they would like to keep him maybe in a more natural role as a talent evaluator, as a scout. And maybe, you promote Casey as a president of basketball ops, and Casey can go find a new GM. I'd find it really hard to believe that they try to can Troy Weaver, given what the organization did to try to hire him for several years.
Yeah. Also, too, it would also be like, would Troy take the demotion? Because I mean, I believe they tried to do that with Stan Van Gundy, and that didn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, the Bauer and Van Gundy era, I know we're going to get into it a little bit later because he did have some very interesting comments about the Pistons' current core in his time here. But I would just tell fans that are watching, that are listening, Dwayne Casey is kind of I would say it's an under the radar name out there. And I think, he has a voice where I think Tom Gores would actually listen to him if there were changes, if there was a trade. I think his voice would hold more weight than the current candidates that maybe they possibly try to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely.